All right, let's jump right in. We're going to tackle a really cool puzzle from Japanese history. You've probably heard that for like 200 years, Japan was totally a closed country. But was it really? Was it completely shut off from the world? Let's dig in and find out.
I mean, really think about that for a second. How can a country be closed but still peek outside? How do you lock all the doors and windows but still get a glimpse of what's going on out there? Well, that's the big mystery we're going to solve today. And it's an incredible story about some super strict rules and one tiny, very important island.
Okay, first things first. To understand the secret window, we got to understand the locked door. So let's talk about Japan's closed country policy.
So get this, for over 200 years, from 1603 all the way to 1868, Japan was pretty much completely shut off from the rest of the world. I mean, 200 years, that is a long time. This whole era is known as the Edo period, and the leaders at the time made a huge call to isolate the country, to basically cut ties with everyone else.
And this whole policy had a specific name, Sakoku. It literally means closed country. So why did they do it? Well, the goal was pretty straightforward. The government wanted to protect Japanese culture and, protect its own power from any outside influence. They were especially worried that ideas from other countries could cause trouble.
And when I say they were serious about this, I mean they were really serious. The rules of Sakoku were incredibly strict. For starters, most foreigners were totally banned from even setting foot in Japan, and it worked both ways. Japanese citizens were forbidden from leaving, and if you did manage to leave, you couldn't come back, ever. It was a complete lockdown.
Okay, so you've got this picture of a country that's completely locked down, right? But, and this is where the story gets so interesting, there was a loophole. A tiny exception to the rule, a secret window, if you will. Now, this wasn't some hidden port or secret mountain pass. Nope. The exception was a tiny man-made island. That's right, they literally built an island to act as their one single connection to the outside world.
That island had a name, Dejima. It was a small, fan-shaped island right in the port of Nagasaki. And for over 200 years, this was Japan's only official gateway for any foreign trade. So right away, that tells you something huge. Japan wasn't completely closed. It just had one very, very tiny and very controlled opening.
So who got to come through this one special door? You can think of it like the most exclusive club in the world. Getting into Dejima was next to impossible. And the guest list was, well, it was extremely short. So who was allowed inside? Just two groups, that's it. The Dutch and the Chinese. The Dutch were the only Europeans allowed in. And what did they bring? Really important stuff, like Western science and news. Then you had the Chinese, who brought things like silk, books, and medicine. But here's the catch. Neither group could just roam freely. They were confined to very specific areas. The Dutch, for example, couldn't leave Dejima at all. So you might be thinking, what's the big deal about one tiny island? Well, it turns out this one tiny connection had a massive impact. It led to something called Dutch learning. And believe me, it completely changed Japan from the inside out. This whole thing got its own name, Rengaku. It literally just means Dutch learning. And it was basically the Japanese study of all the incredible science and tech that was coming out of the West. All of it flowed through Dutch books and the few Dutch traders on Dejima. It was like getting a cheat sheet to the future, slipped under the door. And what were they learning? Super practical stuff. As you can see, medicine was the big one, almost half of it. But they were also soaking up everything they could about engineering and weapons, astronomy, and even botany to help with farming. They weren't just curious, they were strategic. Let's zoom in on medicine for a sec. This was a total game changer. Through Dutch learning, Japanese doctors suddenly got access to Western ideas about anatomy, what the inside of the human body actually looks like. They learned new surgical techniques and got to use advanced medical instruments. This stuff literally saved lives, and it all happened while the country was supposedly closed. But it wasn't just about science and tech. The Dutch also brought something else, something maybe even more valuable: news. Information from around the world. They were basically Japan's one and only international news channel. And this wasn't just casual gossip. It was a whole official process. Once a year, the head of the Dutch trading post had to make this huge trip from Dejima all the way to Edo, which we now call Tokyo. Why? To meet the shogun, the leader of Japan, and give him a direct report on global events. It was basically Japan's annual intelligence briefing from the outside world. So when you put it all together, what do you get? You get this incredibly smart system. Japan's leaders created this carefully balanced world. They weren't just closed, they were strategic.
Yeah, this careful balance meant Japan could stay self-sufficient. It could handle its own business, But at the same time, it was still getting all this super useful knowledge and news from abroad. It was the best of both worlds, really. They got all the good stuff without what they saw as the risks.
So, what's the big takeaway here? It's that Japan's closed country policy wasn't actually about being completely closed off. It was all about control. It was a way for Japan to protect its culture, cherry-pick the best science and tech from the West, and stay informed about what was happening in the world, all on their own terms.
It's just such a fascinating story of control and careful curiosity, isn't it? But it leaves us with one last massive question. What happens when a country that has spent over 200 years just peeking through a tiny window finally decides to throw the main doors wide open? What happens next? Well, that is a story for another time. Thanks for joining me.